When I think about some of the least successful iPhones, the one phone that springs to mind is the iPhone 5C. The iPhone 5C was released in 2013 and was essentially the guts of an iPhone 5 re-released in this weird plastic body, and this actually meant that the iPhone 5C was a year out of date immediately upon release and was also competing with the iPhone 5 directly. The iPhone 5C was criticised for being too expensive for last year's technology in a cheap shell and was ultimately not very respected, especially in hindsight as this phone did not age well. However, Apple learnt many things from the failure of the iPhone 5C, which ultimately improved their budget lineup considerably, and that's what I want to talk about today. The iPhone 5C was intended to appeal to more budget-conscious consumers, younger people, and also individuals who wanted to use their phone as a fashion piece. The issue was the iPhone 5C couldn't appeal to the budget-conscious consumer because it released at 550 quid, which was only 100 quid cheaper than the considerably improved iPhone 5S. And also by this time, you could pick up a used iPhone 5 for less than the iPhone 5C retailed for. In terms of younger people and appealing to students, I'll admit this, I think it was somewhat successful. When the iPhone 5C came out, I was in college and I just saw so many of these iPhone 5Cs. All of my friends did have them, and because they had this hard plastic shell, they could withstand a lot of abuse. In terms of marketing the iPhone 5C as a fashion statement, I kind of think it missed the mark here too. Although it came in lots of colours and it was a fun phone, it kind of got labelled as the iPhone 5 cheap and was seen as an inferior quality product, and this definitely isn't the type of reputation that Apple want to be associated with. The type of person who did want an iPhone to be a fashion statement will have definitely gone for the iPhone 5S, which was considerably improved and looked much more premium. So what lessons did Apple learn from the mistake of the iPhone 5C? Let's start with the price. The successor to the iPhone 5C was the 2016 iPhone SE. This budget-orientated iPhone actually started at a much more reasonable price of £400. This is actually the same price that the 2020 iPhone SE also retails at. Moving on to design, Apple kept colours within their lineup. For example, the SE came in rose gold and the XR came in a wide range of groovy colours. They ensured that the design remained premium and expensive feeling, and they avoided using plastic as the main material. This prevented the budget iPhone being considered a detriment to the premium brand associated with Apple. Take for example the 2020 iPhone SE. Although this phone retails at 400 quid, no one would consider this phone to be a cheap looking phone, and I don't think the existence of the 2020 iPhone SE harms the premium brand of Apple, although it is a very accessible phone. I think another huge factor is also the processor within the budget iPhones. The iPhone 5C cut costs by using the previous generation processor, which ultimately meant it wasn't usable for a very long period and only received 4 iterations of iOS, whilst in comparison the iPhone 5S, which launched at the same time, received 6 iterations of iOS. Since the iPhone 5C, all budget iPhones, Apple ensures that the corners are cut elsewhere and not the processor, and this is vital to ensuring the longevity of the product. Take for example the 2016 iPhone SE. This came with the latest processor that Apple offered just in a smaller package, and also the 2020 iPhone SE launched with the latest processor that Apple could offer. This means that whilst these phones came at a lower price, they offered far better value as you were going to receive the same amount of software support as the flagships. With the lessons that Apple has learned from the failure of the iPhone 5C covered, let's discuss how it holds up in 2022. So let's start off with the design. I've got here a white iPhone 5C, and although it may look cheap in photos and videos and especially renders, the iPhone 5C genuinely feels really good quality and solid in the hand. It doesn't feel flimsy at all. I am personally a big fan of how the iPhone 5C looks and feels on reflection. At the time I didn't like the phone. Looking back on it, I do quite like the design of this phone. On the front of the phone, you'll see a 4-inch display with a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. In 2022, this display is comically small, even compared against my tiny iPhone 12 mini. However, ultimately, the quality of the display does hold up fairly well and is responsive. So performance. The iPhone 5C was powered by the A6 processor along with 1 GB of RAM. Therefore, this phone received its last version of iOS in 2017, which was iOS 10. Obviously, this isn't ideal for usage in 2022, and I can't recommend that you go ahead and buy one. A decent amount of apps don't run on this phone, however, you will find the essentials like YouTube and social media still do work. This phone feels somewhat responsive whilst using it, but this is purely in short bursts. If you're going to use this as your daily driver, I can guarantee that you'd find it painfully frustrating when apps start to crash on you. What this phone does hold up well for is being a music device. It has a headphone port at the bottom, and therefore it's still very appropriate to be something that you load up with a load of MP3s and just take in your pocket as an MP3 player. Anything more than that, then the display feels a little bit too small and the performance just isn't up to scratch. So let's move on to the camera. The camera, it's alright. For what it is, the photos look okay. I never personally owned an iPhone 5C back in the day. I actually bought an iPhone 5 instead. My thought was I'd rather get the more premium looking phone that's a little bit cheaper than the plastic phone that's more expensive. With that being said, the camera on the iPhone 5C was fine for capturing memories. Apple have always done cameras fairly well, so when you're looking back at an old camera, they still hold up somewhat acceptably. By today's standard, you wouldn't really want to be using this camera. At the time, this was a fantastic camera for a phone. I think where this camera can still shine the most is video, so you can actually take some decent video on this phone, and even today it holds up somewhat alright. So let's finish up on the battery life. The battery life on this particular iPhone 5C is completely shot. It's rubbish. It's probably been used for many years and is now just can't hold a charge at all. If you wanted to get somewhat acceptable battery performance, you could replace the battery. Personally, I don't think it's worthwhile replacing the battery of an iPhone 5C just because the phone isn't really usable anyway. With that being said, when the phone was new, I think the battery life was acceptable and would get you through a full day of just light usage. Thank you very much for watching my quick video on the iPhone 5C. This has always been quite an intriguing phone to me, as it just didn't seem right that Apple would make a phone that was just looked and felt a little bit cheaper and was unapologetically plastic. It just didn't align fully with their branding, and I think that the lessons they've learned from this has meant that they're able to still sell reasonably priced phones, but they just feel a lot more premium and they aren't a detriment to that premium brand that Apple tries so desperately to portray. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. All the best. Hello, so I'm filming this on the main camera of an iPhone 5C. Apologies, it's probably very echoey. There is a storm in the UK right now, so unfortunately I'm limited in my shooting locations. So that's why every photo and video that you're seeing from this phone is coming from my flat.